Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I'm a chief financial officer at a growing tech company, and I love my job despite the long hours. My husband and I met in college. He was the fun-loving, creative type who balanced out my more structured personality. When he started his freelance graphic design career, we agreed he'd work from home to be there for our teenagers, 15 and 17. The arrangement seemed perfect on paper. I'd handle the cooking since I genuinely enjoy it, while my husband and kids would take care of the cleanup. Back in college, my husband's dorm room looked like a tornado had hit it, but I chalked it up to the typical college experience. During our early marriage, I did most of the cleaning because his idea of clean was basically making sure nothing was growing mold. I thought having kids would change things, teaching them responsibility and all that. Instead, I somehow ended up with 3 people who shared the same allergic reaction to cleanliness. The kitchen became my breaking point. After 10-hour workdays dealing with budget meetings and client presentations, I come home to what looked like a crime scene. Breakfast dishes piled in the sink, dried milk rings on the counter, crumbs everywhere, and don't even get me started on the stovetop. It looked like they'd been conducting science experiments. One bad day, I came home to find dried spaghetti sauce splattered on the walls. I asked what had happened in the kitchen. My husband casually explained that he'd made lunch, and the kids had somehow managed to make the sauce explode in the microwave. When I questioned why nobody had cleaned it, he made excuses about having a deadline and the kids having homework. The sauce was completely dried by then. I spent 45 minutes cleaning before I could even start cooking. This became a daily routine accompanied by my increasingly frustrated reminders. When I'd ask them to at least rinse the dishes after using them, my older teen would brush me off, saying they'd do it later. When I pressed about when exactly later would be, they'd mumble something about finishing their game first. The younger one would always use homework as an excuse. This went on for months. I tried everything, chore charts, reminder apps, even offering rewards. Nothing stuck. They'd do it for a day or two, then revert to their old habits. The breaking point came after a grueling day at work, where I had to fire someone. I came home to what looked like every dish we owned piled in the sink, crusty food stuck to plates, and some mysterious sticky substance on the floor. That's when I snapped, but not in the way they expected. I grabbed my book, sat on the couch, and started reading. An hour passed before my younger teen asked about dinner. I simply replied that I wasn't sure since the kitchen was too dirty to cook in. My husband suggested I just work around the mess, but I kept reading without responding. My older teen complained about being starving, so I just pointed out that the kitchen was right there. They ended up making sandwiches that night, grumbling the whole time. The next day, same scenario. And the next. By day 4, they were tired of takeout and sandwiches. My husband tried to guilt me by saying it wasn't fair to the kids. I pointed out that coming home to a disaster zone every day wasn't fair either. The kids apologized, but I told them that sorry doesn't clean the kitchen. It took a week of me peacefully reading my books while they scrounged for food before things changed. I came home one day to find my husband wearing rubber gloves, scrubbing the stovetop. Both teens were loading the dishwasher, actually rinsing the dishes first. My husband sheepishly told me they'd had a family meeting. My younger teen admitted they'd been acting like jerks, while the older one complained that sandwiches really sucked. It's been 3 months since then. Now when I come home, the kitchen sparkles. The dishwasher runs every night. Sometimes they even meal prep for me. Last week, I overheard my older teen telling the younger one to clean up their mess, warning them about the possibility of me going on strike again. Now I actually look forward to cooking dinner again, and surprisingly, they've started showing interest in learning some recipes too. I guess hunger really is the best teacher. I've been working as a store manager at this local supermarket for about 5 years now. It's usually a pretty calm job, dealing with the occasional expired product complaint or price match request. But last Tuesday, I experienced probably the most bizarre incident of my entire retail career. The day started normally enough. I was doing my usual rounds, checking on the different departments when I got a call from one of my former colleagues, who now manages a store about 20 miles away. He warned me about this woman who'd been going around to different stores in the area, pulling some elaborate scam to get free groceries. Apparently, she claimed to be possessed by demons and make a huge scene until managers would cave and give her what she wanted just to make her leave. I thanked him for the heads up, thinking it was strange but not really expecting to encounter her myself. Well, wouldn't you know it, barely 2 hours later, I got called to the checkout area because a customer was causing a disturbance. As soon as I arrived, I knew this had to be the woman my colleague warned me about. She matched his description perfectly. Middle-aged, wearing an expensive-looking outfit that seemed a bit too dressy for grocery shopping, with perfectly manicured nails and what looked like very pricey jewelry. She was putting on quite the performance. Her cart was full of high-end items, premium cuts of meat, expensive wines, fancy imported chocolates, probably around $400 worth of groceries. When the cashier told her the total, she suddenly started convulsing and speaking in a ridiculous, fake deep voice, shouting about how the demons were demanding these offerings and that they needed to be appeased. She then started choking herself with her own hands, rolling her eyes back in her head. Several customers backed away, and I could see my cashier was completely freaked out. She kept yelling about how the spirits wouldn't let her pay and were forbidding it, begging for someone to help her. I walked up to her, keeping my distance but making sure to project my voice clearly. I introduced myself as the store manager and told her she needed to either pay for her items or leave the store. She responded by screaming about how I didn't understand, claiming the demons were torturing her and wouldn't let her reach her wallet, all while making exaggerated choking sounds. That's when I told her I understood perfectly, mentioning the call I'd received about her earlier that day and that I knew she'd been pulling this same act at other stores in the area. I demanded that she stop immediately. The change in her demeanor was instant. Her eyes snapped back to normal and she dropped the demon voice. She started yelling at me, saying how dare I accuse her, and insisting she was a God-fearing woman suffering from a genuine affliction. Then, without warning, she lunged at me and bit me hard on the shoulder. I yelled in pain as she screamed that the demons made her do it and that she wasn't responsible. Fortunately, one of our regular customers is a police officer who was shopping on his day off. He'd already called for backup when the situation started escalating. As soon as she heard the sirens, Karen took off running toward the back of the store. It was almost comical watching her try to navigate between the aisles in her heels. They caught up with her in the poultry section, where she was trying to hide behind a display of rotisserie chickens. When they handcuffed her, she started screaming threats at everyone watching, warning that we'd all be cursed and that the demons would remember this, declaring our souls were forfeit. One of my employees had been recording the whole thing on their phone from the moment she started her possession act. The video ended up being key evidence. As it turns out, she'd successfully scammed several other stores out of thousands of dollars worth of merchandise using the same routine. She was charged with assault, attempted theft, and making false reports. During her court appearance, she tried to claim mental illness as a defense, but the judge wasn't buying it, especially after seeing videos of her pulling the same stunt at multiple locations, always targeting high-end items and mysteriously becoming possessed only after hearing the total at checkout. She got 6 months in jail plus mandatory counseling, and she's been banned from pretty much every grocery store in a 50-mile radius. My shoulder healed fine, though I did have to get a tetanus shot. The video of her attempted escape through the poultry section became quite popular among local retail workers group chats. I guess even demons draw the line at running in heels. I've lived in this tiny town my whole life, and I wouldn't have it any other way. With less than 900 people, everyone knows everyone, which can be both a blessing and a curse. I run the local veterinary clinic, which I took over from my father 5 years ago. Being the only vet in town means I've treated pretty much every pet around here at some point. Last month, we started seeing a disturbing pattern. People's cats were showing up either severely injured or dead in their own yards. At first, we thought it might have been coyotes, but security cameras from several houses caught the real culprit, a large German shepherd that belonged to a woman who'd moved here about 6 months ago. The dog would regularly escape her yard and roam the neighborhood, attacking cats whenever it found them. In just 3 weeks, we lost 4 cats and had to treat 6 others for serious injuries. As the town's vet, I had to be the one to both treat these injured pets and break the devastating news to families when their cats couldn't be saved. I tried talking to the dog's owner directly. I explained that our town has a leash law requiring all pets to be contained on their property. She dismissed my concerns completely, telling me that it wasn't her problem and that people shouldn't let their cats outside anyway. When I pointed out that the law specifically required her to contain her dog, she just brushed me off, saying she'd think about it. Nothing changed. More cats got hurt. Finally, one of our town's social media group moderators made a post warning everyone about the situation. They urged people to keep their pets safe and report any incidents to local authorities, reminding everyone that the leash law requires all pets to be contained on their property. I commented on the post, along with several others, pointing out that the owner had been warned multiple times. I mentioned that the city could fine them for each violation and that they were also liable for vet bills and replacement costs for deceased pets. That's when the dog owner's aunt decided to make an appearance. She started berating everyone in the comments, calling us selfish for attacking her niece. She suggested that instead of complaining, we should all pitch in to help fix her niece's fence, arguing it would be cheaper than all the vet bills. She went on about how the community should come together to solve problems. I responded by simply asking how much she personally planned to contribute to her niece's fence fund. Suddenly, both the aunt and the dog owner went completely silent. But I wasn't done. I compiled all the security camera footage from affected neighbors, along with detailed medical records of the injured and deceased cats. I sent everything to our local authorities and animal control. The next day, the dog owner received multiple citations, totaling over $2,000 in fines. Animal control gave her 48 hours to secure her yard, or they would remove the dog. They also mandated a behavioral assessment for the dog before it could remain in town. The aunt showed up at my clinic the next day, yelling about how I was destroying her niece's life and how she couldn't afford the fines. I simply repeated my question about how much she was planning to contribute to fix the fence. She tried to argue that I was being vindictive, but I reminded her that her niece's negligence had caused death and suffering to multiple family pets and thousands in vet bills to their owners. I suggested that if she was so concerned, she could help her niece pay for both the fence and the fines. She stormed out, but the story has a satisfying ending. The dog owner finally installed proper fencing. Apparently, she could afford it after all. She also had to pay restitution to all the affected pet owners, and her dog completed behavioral training. We haven't had any incidents since, and the aunt blocked me on all social media after I started responding to all her community posts by asking how much she was contributing. I work in IT support, which means I spend most of my days helping people figure out why their computers aren't working. You'd think this would make me super vigilant about my own tech stuff, but honestly, after dealing with other people's problems all day, the last thing I want to do is dig through my own digital life. That's probably why I didn't catch this mess sooner. I'm pretty close with my siblings. We all live within an hour of each other, and I'm the cool aunt-uncle who gets the kids gaming stuff for birthdays and holidays. I don't have kids of my own, so I like to spoil my nieces and nephews a bit. That's never been a problem until now. It started when I noticed my bank account seemed a little lower than usual. I usually just look at the total and make sure there's nothing wildly off, but something felt wrong this time. So I sat down one weekend and actually went through my statements line by line. That's when I found them. Over 100 charges from PlayStation scattered throughout the year. My heart nearly stopped. I only bought 4 things on PlayStation all year, 2 games for each of my accounts. But here were charge after charge, adding up to about $1,500. My first thought was that someone had stolen my credit card info. But before I panicked completely, I decided to check with my siblings. Both have kids with PlayStation accounts, and I wanted to make sure there wasn't some innocent explanation before I started disputing charges. I messaged them asking if their kids might have accidentally used my card for any purchases. Both said no, their kids hadn't bought anything. So I called PlayStation and my bank to report the fraudulent charges. The bank was great about it. They could reverse the recent charges right away and said they'd investigate the older ones. 3 days later, my phone rings. It's my teenage nephew, and he's freaking out. He called me in a panic, telling me his PlayStation account had been banned and he couldn't play anything. When I asked if he'd bought anything on his account recently, he insisted he hadn't, reminding me about the gift card I got him for his birthday and claiming that was all he'd used. Something wasn't adding up. I still had his email login info from when I helped him set up his account, so I decided to check, and there it was. Every single one of those charges matched up with games and items on his account, all the stuff he played regularly. When I confronted him again, his story started changing. He hesitantly admitted that maybe he'd bought a few small things. When I pointed out there were over 100 purchases, he went quiet. That's when my sister called. And instead of being mad at her son for stealing, she was mad at me. She started yelling that this was all my fault, claiming I must have put my card on his account when I bought him something. I explained that I'd given him gift cards specifically so he wouldn't need a credit card on the account, but she wouldn't listen. She kept arguing that if it had been her card, she would have gotten alerts and that I should have been more careful. When I pointed out that her son knew he was spending someone else's money, she got even more defensive. She insisted he was just a kid and that he always asks her for permission when he wants to buy something. She couldn't understand why I didn't get alerts like she did. I suggested that maybe he stopped asking her because he found my card info and realized no one was stopping him. This really set her off. She started shouting that I was just blaming her kid for everything. She said she'd call PlayStation and pay it all back, demanding that I stop the dispute. When I refused, she threatened to tell everyone that I was being petty over a few dollars and that it would be my fault when her son couldn't play games with his friends anymore. I reminded her that it wasn't just a few dollars. It was $1,500 that he stole. I ended up blocking her number after she kept sending me angry texts. Then I did something that probably makes me a bit of a jerk, but I don't regret it. I forwarded all the email receipts from his PlayStation account to my brother-in-law. You know, the one who actually pays the bills in their house. Turns out my sister hadn't told him about any of this. 2 days later, my nephew's PlayStation was sold, and he's grounded until he can pay back every cent through a new part-time job. My sister had to awkwardly call me to apologize after my brother-in-law made it clear that her enabling behavior wasn't acceptable. She's not speaking to me much these days, but honestly, that's fine by me. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.